Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banko and me, Adam Moreau. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to the T-Work podcast. Today we have on Evan Brochin, a very close friend of mine. Actually, mortal enemies probably until about like third grade because we were always picked on opposite sides of recess football. But thankfully, we got over that and we've been buddies for life. Evan is an graduate of Ohio State University where he did his undergrad, went on to Ross Medical School where he did his formal training, and now he is in residency with the University of Toledo Medical Center. He is a doctor, resident doctor of anesthesiology, and we're really excited to hear about his path, his very interesting stories, especially his path through medical school, but might even have some fun looks into the past because Evan has overcome some pretty interesting things in his soccer career as well when he was younger, and just really want to have these kind of serious discussions that Evan and I maybe had in passing in our younger years, but now in a more formal setting that Banko can just stare in as a third party and hopefully ask the questions that I never really thought of. But thanks, Evan, for coming on. Anything you want to add to that to kick us off?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know you talked about this. I saw you a couple months ago or wherever that was, and I don't really know what to expect. Never really been on a podcast before, but yeah, I'm here and I'm willing to answer anything and everything you guys have.
Sweet. Yes. Well, that last time we were all together was the fateful day at that Cheesecake Factory where I happened to be in town for some work. Banko was down in St. Pete on a job interview. Shout out Banko for actually nailing the interview and getting the job. And Evan was on a little vacation. And I guess the stars aligned, and thankfully we actually got the podcast going, and here we are. Yeah, I think that waitress was amazed by the amount of bread we ate, but
Yeah,
that's the point of going to Cheesecake Factory. So,
yeah.
Evan, let's kick it off. I guess the perfect place to start is how was it graduating from a class of 64 people to going to one of the top three largest universities in the United States, in Ohio State?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I went to a small high school where everyone knew everyone's parents, where they lived, and you couldn't do anything with it, getting out to everyone you ever knew in like about 5 minutes. But I guess going from there to Ohio State, it was scary at first, but it actually didn't seem like too big of an adjustment. I remember when I was touring there, they were always like, you can't make a small school big, but you can make a big school small. And I kind of felt that way. Like it was huge. You wouldn't see, I mean, you could see someone and never see them ever again. But like in your major, in your classes, you're kind of seeing the same group of people over and over again, or like, having the same routes to your classes on, you know, any given day, you see similar people. So, I mean, the adjustment wasn't as big as I thought it'd be, but I liked going to a big school. It's a lot of fun, had a lot of opportunities that I think maybe a smaller school wouldn't have had. Yeah, but I mean, there's drawbacks too. Um, the sheer number of people, uh, it's constant, kind of weeding out in certain classes. So pros and cons.
And then your major when you were at Ohio State, was it pre-med track from the start, or was it specific in like biology or chemistry or something like that?
Yeah, so Ohio State didn't have a pre-med track per se, but I majored in biology. You could really major in anything you want. You could major in economics or theater or whatever you wanted, but as long as you do like the med school prerequisites, which is there's a bunch of classes for that, then you can apply to med school and whatnot. But it just made more sense to me to do a science class and get more or science major and get more science classes beyond even the prerequisites.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And then you jump from an ocean of Ohio State back to kind of a small little pond in the grand scheme of things when it comes to med school. Granted, it was a school in the middle of the ocean. So
Yes.
maybe getting more into the med school track, and then we can figure out this weaving path of where we want to go. Can you talk about your decision to go to Ross and then even explain just what Ross is or going to school in the Caribbean?
Yeah. So basically, there's medical schools in the United States, in the 50 states and whatnot. And then there's a few United States medical schools that are located in the Caribbean. So you get the same degree, an equivalent education and whatnot. Um, but historically, schools like Ross are easy, they're easier to get into in a way. They take more people. There's they're they take lower admission standards. And I had a decent MCAT coming out of college. My GPA wasn't great. It's not that I took college, I didn't take it seriously, but I just like didn't study the right way. I didn't know how to study. I had a good time. And there's things you can do. You can get master's degrees or do all these other extra things to get into a medical school in the United States. Or the Caribbean is an option, and it's not a guaranteed admission, but it's easier. And I took that route and kind of bet on myself because while it's the easy way in, it's kind of the hard way out. Um, Again, kind of like Ohio State, you're constantly being weeded out. Um, there's there's less help. There's less uh, like in U.S. med schools, they want you to succeed. In Caribbean schools, they still want you to succeed, but like they're not going to hold your hand because they push you to the limit because your pass rates on board exams reflects on them. So if they can cut out all the people that they know are not going to pass, they can keep their numbers high on, competitive with US med schools. So yeah, I went to Ross, which is on an island in the Caribbean called Dominica. Unfortunately, which I think we'll probably get into later, the med school is no longer on Dominica. It's on Barbados now because a hurricane wiped out the entire school and the country for that matter. Um, but yeah, so I ended up going to Ross, and it worked out for me. It doesn't for a lot of people. There's usually I probably started with 380 people and finished with less than 180. So like 50% of the people don't make it through. Whereas in the US med school, if you get in, you're gonna get out, kind of thing.
I'm sorry for laughing, but of course I know a lot of these stories that we're going to get into. Of course, I'm not laughing that a hurricane destroyed an island. I'm laughing at your experience.
Right.
So if we're able to clip this and get some clips on YouTube or Instagram or something, just want to get in front of that before
Yeah.
I get canceled for something. But yeah, Evan, I remember when we would check in or like be back in Ohio on breaks or something like that, or you'd come visit me in New Orleans at the time. I remember hearing those stories of like, yeah, well, we just finished the first period or semester or whatever, and there goes half the college. Just everybody's gone. I remember it was like cuts on a sports team or
Yeah.
anything like that. Just each time you go up, like, is your name on the board kind of deal, almost like the old school movies where it's just like, yep, well, made it another round. Hopefully I can hang on. Is
Pretty much. I mean, you'd have people, you'd go home after a semester, you'd go home for a week or two, you'd come back, and there'd be people that like, oh, where's so and so? Like they just kind of drop off the planet, and people aren't really, they don't like talking about, oh, I failed out of med school, I failed it. So like some of those people you never hear from again, even if you're close friends. Luckily, I had a good friend group that, most of us made it through okay. And I think that was a big thing because, you get in with the wrong people more or less that are enjoying the island rather than like grinding out studying and they don't really understand what they signed up for, then you can kind of get caught up in that and get eliminated essentially. But yeah.
Yeah, I'll
Yeah.
ask my last lead up question and then I'll take a back seat for a little bit. The other one for me is Evan, of course I know your family. I know the professions of your father and mother, but was it always in the cards for you to go to med school? Was that what you wanted from a young age? I know soccer was your passion for the longest time. Like when did med school or becoming a doctor become the number one motivator or goal for you?
Stole one of my
Yeah.
questions.
So, oh, sorry, what was that?
Nothing, you're good. I was just saying he stole one of my questions. It's
Oh,
fine.
Yeah, so both my parents were dentists, and so and a lot of their friends were in the medical field, doctors of various kinds. So it's kind of around that my whole life. Never really had any interest in being a dentist, but I always had an interest in science. I guess that kind of led me to the med school route on a very basic level. I was like, I'm sure if you asked me when I was a kid, I would say, oh yeah, I want to be a doctor, but like, I didn't know what that meant really back then. Um, but like I just kind of knew I didn't want a job where I like sat at a desk kind of thing. I don't know why. It was just that's just how it was. And honestly, I there's not that many jobs where that I could think of that you don't kind of sit at a desk, you go in and do that. And I know, there's tons of different kinds of doctors you can be, and there's still a lot of sitting at desks and whatnot for some people, but not wanting that and liking science and having kind of medical background all my life uh, kind of sent me that route.
Gotcha. Yeah.
In I guess what year? So we gotta
Yeah,
get the
you keep
clarifier.
yeah, you keep
When
firing off
what
questions.
age, Evan, do you think it was? Like, I mean, was this fourth grade where you were like, no, I really do think like doctor is what I want to be.
It was probably like, I don't know, maybe freshman year of high school or maybe a little earlier, junior high. Like I tried to get good grades in high school because I knew down the road I needed to get into a good college and then get into a medical school. So like I remember early on I was, you know, I wouldn't say I was at the top of my class by any means, but I was certainly trying to be in the top, half or third or quarter or whatever it was, from an early age, and that was kind of the motivation.
That was a good clarifying question, Adam, because I think a lot of people think they have to have everything figured out and know what they want to do in high school, which Evan, you did, so good for you. And you went that route. I didn't figure it out until end of junior year of college, and it was not my major that I wanted to go into finance. I was in computer science, so that was really fun.
Oh,
Uh, but one, I want to shout out Adam for actually having a professional mic now. Like he's feeling good about himself now, so he's got to ask important questions. This is the first episode I've seen him with an actual microphone, so good for you.
Thank you.
Um, Evan, I guess going back to sort of that program, the med program, where there was basically a cut list in Adam's terms. For the ones that you did stay in touch with, if any, that did get cut, is it basically like they went a completely different route in life now, or are they still pursuing like a different medical school? Like what does that look like? Just to give a better understanding of that.
yeah, some that I keep in touch with, um, they actually transferred to like a different Caribbean medical school, and like I went to like there's like four, I don't know if legit is the right word, but like four of them, four Caribbean medical schools that like you want to go to that you can get into a residency and whatnot. And then there's like 100. There's a ton of like really shady small ones that are like just kind of trying to take your money. Some people would transfer to those schools, still not make it out of those schools. I know some people. I know a person that went into physical therapy. She just graduated physical therapy school. Others just completely dropped medicine altogether, and others are just kind of a mystery, and they're still kind of figuring it out, or um, yeah, or some go into nursing. It's just kind of a variety. Um, but yeah, a lot of them I don't keep in touch and too much with people that didn't make it through just because I mean I wasn't around them for too long.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess going back to sort of like you wanting to be a doctor, then actually pursuing it in college, like undergrad, med school, when did you figure out, as you mentioned, there's so many different routes you can take and be so many different types of doctors. When did you kind of figure out this is the type of doctor I want to be? And what is that answer, I guess? So to give that information as well. But when did you kind of figure that part of it out as well?
Honestly, not even until med school. You kind of a lot of people go into med school saying, I want to be this, I want to be that, and they have an idea of what that job is, whether it's cardiologist or pediatrician or family medicine doctor or surgeon. Once you get into medical school, you do rotations, you slowly figure out what you actually do like and don't like, and you realize some things are how you expect it to be, and some things aren't even close. Me going into medical school, I wasn't like gung ho on being an anesthesiologist. I had an open mind. I was going to see what I liked in my clinical rotations. And, um, anesthesiology has checked a lot of boxes for me. And another thing is people go in and I may have wanted anesthesiology or whatever, but how the residency works is you match into a residency based on test scores and grades and letters of recommendation. You could want to be a surgeon or whatever more than anyone, but if you don't have the numbers for it, you won't be a surgeon. You can even not match into residency, graduate from medical school and be a doctor with no residency, which is can't do much with that, or match into a specialty that you had no interest in the first place. So it's scary. And I'm lucky I matched into anesthesia. That's what I wanted to do. But again, I didn't figure that out until probably my third year of medical school.
Got it. No, that's good context to have. What was the biggest surprise? Like you said, doing the rotations, like you expect one thing and you expect that like a surgeon's this or an anesthesiologist is this. What, from your perspective, was like the biggest surprise going through medical school that you weren't expecting?
A big surprise was a lot of medicine, like in the hospital, is not even medicine. There's like a lot of politics and drama, and like there's a drive to just like push it. It's like a business, a drive to see as many patients as possible in a short amount of time. You gotta document things like so perfectly and tediously, and it's time consuming just so like insurance can bill properly. And you're writing these long notes that take forever. You're rounding on patients, and people don't even, listen. Like you have this background and expertise, and a lot of times patients don't listen to you and they end up back in the same position. And you just do a lot of stuff that isn't medically related. It's a lot of social work in a way too that's more than I expected. And I don't know, it's the medical system is it's not all medicine. I mean, it's hard to describe, but there's just a lot of stuff that takes away from the actual medical part that got most people interested in going to medical school in the first place.
Let's take some more time on that one specifically. Banko, I'm glad you brought that up. Like the little things that Evan might not have expected going in. Evan, when you say like all this documentation or the drama behind it, no, it's not going to be Grey's Anatomy, but I'm sure there are constant internal fights, whether it is in your rotations, like who's trying to look the best or who's really trying to prove themselves. Do you feel there was, uh, I guess, like kind of a battle or an internal struggle of like, how much do I help versus how much am I on my own here?
Yeah, like there's a lot of like you when you're still learning, you want to be helpful, but you also don't want to get in the way. You don't want to, overstep your bounds, and it's kind of hard to tell. And there's people in the medical world, they're called gunners, medical students that are like always trying to one up other students. You're talking to your attending doctor who's essentially you're teaching you, and he's running the show, he or she's running the show, and you get they'll ask you questions, and that's also called pimping in the medical world. You get pimped on certain things, and there's always people that jump in and answer questions and try to seem like the smart one and at the expense of the other people. And so there's like stuff like that you have to deal with. And just kind of the medical world as well. It's a hierarchical system. It's like medical students, residents, then attending physicians, and like the lower you are, the worse you get treated. And it's unfortunate, but like even though all these doctors were residents and med students at one time, you're kind of like, I don't know, you're low man on the totem pole, and you feel it at every step of the way. And it's just kind of like the culture of medicine, and it's always been that way. And it seems because they grew up, they went through the system, and it was like that for them, that it's now passed down when they're the boss. And so that's kind of unfortunate as well. But you got to have a thick skin to go into medicine, I think.
Do you think that's because it's an expertise based industry? Like you can't really move on unless you have the education or you have the experience behind you. So others are constantly trying to check somebody if maybe they're new to the system.
For sure. And like it's true. Like you have people's actual lives at stake sometimes. I mean, you want to make sure you know what you're doing and why you're doing it and how to do it. At the same time, it's probably a little bit of a power trip because they were also, low man at the totem pole at one point and kind of got kicked while they were down, and now it's their turn to like be the big guy or whatever. But I mean, it's not all bad. I think you develop it. Some people develop a tolerance to it, like I did. It didn't bother me in the end. I just like whatever. This person's not mad at me. It's just like whatever. And then some people take it personally, and it like ruins them, and they leave medicine, and it's a whole thing. But I mean, I think there's a necessity to some of that to some extent because like you got to realize how serious it can be sometimes.
So I'm gonna bring it a little bit lighter then. So Adam mentioned Grey's Anatomy. Did you watch the show, and how realistic does the show portray sort of residency and the hospitals and stuff like that based on your experience?
I've seen bits and pieces of Grey's Anatomy, but I've seen other medical shows, and there's a little truth to everything. Like everything's dramatized in those shows, but like there's drama. There's like things that shouldn't be happening in hospitals that definitely do. There's I do think it's funny because like they'll have a resident in Grey's Anatomy that's like admitting a patient to the emergency room, but then also like doing the surgery and then also rounding them on the floors and doing all this. Like they're every type of doctor ever, like in residency, and like they're doing it all and like going to the x-ray scanner with the patient. I mean, there's stuff like that's just like not how it is. And it's just kind of funny to see. But I mean, there's a little truth to everything in Grey's Anatomy. The most accurate show to describe residency though is Scrubs. So recommend that.
Okay,
Really?
good to
Yep.
know.
Yeah, it's a good show too. Very funny. But yeah, recommend that if you want like it's not 100% accurate, but like it's about as close as it gets.
I've never spent much time watching Scrubs. I know my fiance loves it,
Yeah,
but I will have to check it out, I guess, just to have a better understanding of your life. Are you that
for sure.
funny? Could you have been on Scrubs?
Me?
Yeah,
I don't know. I've been told I looked like Zach Braff before,
you
so
do.
maybe.
That is fair. That is fair. I had a question, I lost it. So Adam, I'm gonna bump to you. I
Okay.
had it. I don't
Yeah.
know where it is.
Don't worry. I'll reel us back in and
Yeah.
you just hop in whenever you need it.
Hmm.
You take your time, bud. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, yeah.
But all right, Evan, I guess now like keeping the track of rotations. When you were on these rotations, two-parter. We know you fell in love with anesthesiology. I want to know maybe another one that you were like another track that you were super interested in that maybe if anesthesiology wasn't the final destination, maybe another spot you may have ended up.
Mhm.
And then a track that you absolutely despised, that you wanted nothing to do with.
Yeah. So I did apply to a backup specialty as well for residency. It was internal medicine, and from internal medicine, you can go into cardiology or gastroenterology or pulmonology or like there's a lot of branches off internal medicine. Um, and anesthesia is super competitive. Internal medicine is slightly less. So I had that as a backup. But if I ended up in internal medicine, I probably would have specialized even further and did a fellowship in pulmonary medicine and critical care and worked in an ICU. That was something I wanted to do at first. Now having more exposure to the ICU, I'm not sure I wanted to do that. But anesthesiology is kind of like ICU, but on a shorter time scale. Um, People will be in the OR for minutes to hours, and the ICU is kind of similar patient and kind of similar management, but on a scale to hours to days. So it kind of translates somewhat. Um, and then some things that I absolutely hated on rotations. I hated OB-GYN. Um, it just wasn't for me. And I don't know. I didn't love peds. It's not that I don't like kids, but I just like I don't know. I it just didn't mesh well with me. Not my thing.
The birthing of kids or the supporting of kids, not things for Evan Brochin, it sounds like.
Correct.
Maybe one day in your love life in the future, though. I guess we shouldn't knock that out, but I guess just the care of other children.
Yeah, no, it's not that I don't. It's you're dealing with the kid and you're dealing with the parents, and the parents are like when it comes to like their kids, especially young kids, it can be crazy, and you're dealing with multiple people. It's like the parents are your patients too, and OB-GYN is just it's a little different. It's not just like birthing of children. There's other stuff that goes into it, and it's actually a pretty surgical specialty as well. But yeah, it just wasn't for me. And the personalities in OB-GYN are a little too intense for me too. They're kind of an intense specialty, believe it or not. And then pediatrics was a little like not intense enough. Not that the medicine isn't intense, but I can't do that happy go lucky thing all day long for the rest of my life.
That's Adam's
It's
job.
like an extension of elementary school teachers.
Kind of. You have to, yeah, it takes a certain personality.
Adam, you'd be great at that. You could be Mr. Positive all the time.
Yeah,
But
totally. Not with kids, though.
But when it turns quick. So
Big time.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is I would be treating all these 6 year olds as if they're 32, just telling them straight. I don't think that would go over so well.
And you might have to try it out, see how it works.
Well, I don't plan on ever doing anything with pediatric medicine.
maybe flex grip might make its way in.
Yeah, but that would require me to go to med school, and that is not in my cards.
Evan, to give perspective on that, can you kind of give the timelines of like undergrad, med school, residency, all that, like so that people understand how long it actually is until, I guess in blunt terms, how long it takes you to basically start getting paid as a doctor.
Yeah.
And like have the actual job where you're actually getting rewarded for it.
Right. So you go through 4 years of high school and you do 4 years of undergrad, then another 4 years of medical school. After you do 4 years of medical school, you've got your MD, you're a doctor, but then depending on the specialty, can do either a range of 3 years of residency to 5 years of residency. If you want to specialize further, it's another maybe 1, 2, or 3 years of fellowship after that. So just to get to residency, it's 4 years of college, 4 years of med school, so 8 years, and then about 4 years of residency before you're actually getting paid like the salary you think of when you think of doctors. Now in residency you get paid. It's not a great salary, and by the amount of hours you work, it comes out to less than minimum wage, which kind of sucks because we're working 60 to 80 hours a week, and that grind is not fun for what you make, but there's light at the end of the tunnel, hopefully. So
Yeah, exactly. Where were your residencies, like location wise? Because like you grew up in Toledo, you decided to stay in Ohio and go to Ohio State and Columbus. So you didn't hate the weather that much, but then you went to the tropics. So like then you're like, all right, I kind of figured it out. Where did you go after that?
yeah, so the first 2 years of medical school were in the Caribbean. It's all like you go to lectures, you learn. It's book stuff. It's like college basically, but all medicine. And then the next 2 years of medical school, the second or the third and fourth year, are your clinical rotations where you're going through a bunch of different specialties. There's some mandatory ones and some elective ones you can choose, and that's for 2 years. And so for my third year of medical school, I was mostly in the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. Or sorry, the third year of medical school, I was on the Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. After that, my fourth year, I kind of moved around a little bit. I was back in Florida again. I was in Sarasota, Bradenton. I was in Danbury, Connecticut. I was in the Detroit area. I was going to be in New York until COVID happened. So there's a lot of moving around. That was kind of my choice. But yeah, I ended up back in Toledo for residency. So that's where I have been the last 3 years, and I have still one more year of residency left. So until then, I'll be here. And then after that, I get a job wherever I want, wherever I can get a job. And that might be here, it might not be.
And on those rotations, Evan, is your path of all these different geographic locations, is that normal? Or I know you said you kind of had some say in that. Is that
Yeah.
something most students will do? Because I know you wanted to get a good idea of where you might fit around the country. Whenever you and I have talked about that, you've always wanted to kind of scope out a place you
Yeah.
might want to live or work.
So like if you went to like a US med school, say in Dallas, Texas, most of your rotations are going to be in and around Dallas, Texas. So you'll be there for all 4 years. Your 2 years of, book stuff and then your 2 years of clinical stuff. But in the Caribbean, since there's no real like hospital attached, our school has contracts with a bunch of hospitals around the country, and you can kind of choose these tracks. You can go to California where they have hospitals. You can go to New York, Florida, Michigan. Chicago has a bunch, and I could have all done all 4 years, or sorry, the third and fourth year all in one place. Um, but I wanted to move around and see certain things, and part of it was I had friends going to certain places. Another part was certain elective rotations that were offered in certain hospitals in certain states, or I heard this was good here, so I went there. And a lot of people look at it as like kind of a downside, like, oh, you had to move 1,000 times, live in all these places. Like I kind of see it as a pro. I got to see a bunch of different hospitals, a bunch of different cities and states, and you kind of make connections at those places. So when it comes to applying for residency, you have a bigger, kind of a wider scope than if I had just been in, one city for all 4 years of medical school, and no one really knew me outside of that city.
As an
So yeah,
additional strength on top of that, I apologize if I'm cutting your flow,
no,
but I,
no,
I feel like that's kind of like an awesome resume builder to an extent. Like you showed your capability to integrate into a new system and just like streamline it right away. Like it's kind of like showing that you can fit right in immediately, like get with the program and just be fully functional. Like maybe that's just because I'm seeing this as an outsider perspective. I don't understand the medical field,
yeah,
but I would think that's a massive benefit on your side.
yeah, for sure. Because every time you move to a new place, a new hospital system, everything's brand new to you, and like you're kind of starting from square one, whether it be like how the charting system works, or where to go, or like what the attendings are like, or the city or whatever. So it's like you have to be adaptable, and I think it shows that you are adaptable. Um, it just also depends on if you get asked about it in interviews, how you spin it, because people outside of Caribbean schools might not know. They're like, oh, why'd you bounce around? Like, were there problems here, or were the problems there? But like, that's not the case. I chose to do these, and here's X, Y, Z reason why, and this is why I think it's a benefit. And but yeah,
Speaking of good interview stories, I'm gonna bring it back to the hurricane and that whole situation. So
yeah,
I'm sure that is definitely a story you utilize in interviews and conversations as well. So do you want to kind of get into that?
yeah. So that the hurricane, that was in September 2017. I believe it was 2017. It was Hurricane Maria. It's Category 5 hurricane. It wiped through the Caribbean. It was the one that kind of destroyed Puerto Rico as well. But it hit Dominica first as a Category 5, little known island that once Puerto Rico was hit, no one really cared about anything else. No one even knew it was an island. Um, but yeah, it destroyed the entire school. It destroyed the island. I mean, it was known as the nature island. Trees, mountains, the most mountainous island in the Caribbean. It's all rainforest. It's not developed very much. It's kind of a third world country outside of the campus. And when the hurricane hit, I mean, the tops of all the palm trees were off. It looked like a bomb went off in the city, or in the country. Buildings were collapsed. Roofs were gone. Um, Electric poles were down. I mean, it was like I don't even know how to describe what it looked like after the hurricane. And like, yeah, and I was on the island when it happened. It was one of the scariest nights of my life. If you've ever been in the middle of a hurricane, I don't know how many people have. I mean, it was terrifying. You're hearing things break. You're the noises the buildings make are disturbing. The wind just sounds like a train is like outside your window. I mean, it's crazy. Um, and yeah, so basically the hurricane hit. People lost a lot of stuff. People lost their roofs. And we're stranded there. Well, I was stranded there for 8 days until we could get evacuated. Some people got evacuated a little earlier. That's a whole other thing. Was 8 days on the island with like literally nothing. I literally survived off of coconuts we found on the ground and a stash of Cliff Bars I had from in my little snack pantry that didn't get destroyed. And I can't even eat Cliff Bars anymore because it just like makes me nauseous thinking of it. Um, but yeah, it was basically 1,000 Americans and Canadians with staff, faculty, students stranded there, and they had to send in the U.S. military, the Canadian military, and get us evacuated. Some got evacuated on helicopter, some by plane, some by like little catamaran boats, some by cruise ships. I got evacuated by a pirate themed booze cruise. It literally looked like a pirate ship. Like it was kind of insane. And after 8 days of being on that island, they took this stupid pirate ship like 12 hours to St. Lucia. This boat is not meant for the open ocean. Like it was the most miserable experience of my life. It was rocking back and forth. Everyone was nauseous, throwing up, being soaked by waves, getting burnt by the sun. And we get to St. Lucia and then eventually get evacuated by plane to Miami from there. And then everyone goes to their wherever they're from Miami. But yeah, tons of stories from just being on the island after the hurricane hit and during the hurricane that are.
And which SEAL team was it that came in for y'all?
It was SEAL Team 2. Yeah, so they had Navy SEALs come in. They had snipers on the roof. There's one Category 5 hurricane-proof building on that entire island, and that was our student center. So that building was virtually undamaged. It was kind of the home base. Other than that, every other building was pretty much destroyed in pieces. And so they set up camp like on the roof there because there's local. We live among the locals in that town, and there's looting. I had friends that were held up at machete point, like literally like give me your stuff and like hold a machete to them. And so it was pretty dangerous actually to be outside of campus and outside the protection of those guys, and couldn't really go back to your apartments. Some were just destroyed or flooded, or all their stuff was gone. And we tried to go back and get the stuff we could from people's places, like food or snacks or important whatever memorabilia that people had. And you kind of had to walk around with like a weapon, like a piece of rubble or rocks, just in case someone was trying to steal from you or like hurt you. Because I mean, it was wild times.
Insane. So yes, to Banko's question, how does this get dropped in an interview?
So yeah, people love that story. It kind of went around the medical world that it happened, and they're like, "Oh, like Ross, were you in the hurricane?" And it was a big talking point in a lot of the interviews, and it was good because it showed, and the school used this word like over and over, like to a point where it got annoying in every email. And it was like resilience, essentially, like you guys showed this resilience, but like it kind of shows that you have this resilience, you made it out of that thing, and continue med school leads to another story because the last semester of my second year of medical school was done on a cruise ship. It was done on a boat, which had its own challenges, and so people would ask about the semester on the boat and how challenging that was, and just life in a third world country while you're also balancing medical school. Even before the hurricane, a lot of good stories, and it kind of shows who you are as a person when you're able to kind of tell them all the stuff you went through. Because medical school is not easy in itself, but if you go to you have to deal with that, and also your electricity goes out like almost daily, or you go to the grocery store and there's literally no food on the shelves, or it's 100 degrees and your air conditioning goes out. I mean, there's so many things that just like happen. I didn't have hot water in my apartment for like the whole 2 years I was there. I was showering, taking cold showers every morning. Like, I mean, just little things like you don't have the comforts of home, and the hurricane and then the subsequent boat kind of exacerbated all that stuff. So it was good to tell residency programs like what you've been through, and how you got through it, and why you'll be resilient in residency, because that's not an easy challenge either. So
Well, Evan obviously set the standard for biohacking by doing the cold plunge before it was the cold plunge.
I was
yeah,
gonna say
it
that
was
you're just stealing everything today. Damn.
I'm on, man.
I know.
It was actually funny because they had a heater. The heater was actually on like the shower head itself. The water was supposed to go through these coils and get heated in this electric thing. And it just like barely worked. It was hot for like 5 seconds and it was cold. But the water pressure was surprisingly good. So every, week the thing would slowly the shower head would slowly go up to where it like isn't even hitting me anymore. So you have to reach up and grab it and like put it back down, and this that you would get electrocuted, like literally electrocuted every time you touch the shower head. Like it would shock you down to your toes, and you're like wet. You're in a shower. I mean, and it would just be something you just like slowly forget about. It's like, oh, gotta fix it. And then it was like it's crazy. I mean, there's stupid stuff like that.
Might be the best way to wake up. Might be better than coffee.
Yeah,
Shock
yeah,
yourself awake.
exactly. It was insane.
Evan, how's that boat doing now that you guys got put on?
Yeah, the boat. So it was an Italian ferry that I don't know if they bought or rented. I don't know, but it was based in the Mediterranean Sea and it would do like day trips from Italy to other places around there. They took over to the Caribbean and we lived on. But after we got off the boat after that semester and that all that happened, there's this news story, this viral video going around of this giant boat crashing into this dock in I don't know if it was Italy or Greece or something or Spain, and causing this big crane to fall over and hit some explosion barrels with some oil or something in it that exploded, and two people running, and then the boat like slowly backs up. Like it was like a meme, like, oh, like I don't know, it's hard to explain. But that was a boat we were on, and we all saw that. And this video started getting passed around. We're like, oh my god, that's the boat was called the GNV Excellent, Grand Navi Velocity Excellent, and it had it in big letters on the side. Like, oh, that's the boat we lived on. Just like crashed into this dock and caused this explosion. And I don't know. It's funny. I don't know what it's doing now. I don't know. They should take it out of commission.
I actually didn't hear that story. I've heard most of the stories through the dinners and drinks that we've gotten over the years, but that one I
Yeah,
didn't know.
yeah. I'll have to find the video for you
Yeah, we
guys.
we definitely need that video whenever this comes out, and we'll just throw that video on there.
Yeah,
That's
good
right.
times.
Evan causing problems, one nation at a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see a common theme here. I'm maybe I don't want to go to where you're permanently at
I
because
know.
things
Hey, there was
follow you.
another couple
No,
hundred people on that boat too, not just me.
if you keep Evan close, nothing that bad can happen to you. It's when you let him go, that's
True.
when the issue occurs.
It follows him. It doesn't, it's not while he's there. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's
Yes,
fair. So keep him around. Yes.
exactly.
I'm gonna turn it away from medical school. So Adam mentioned this at the beginning, and I forgot that I learned this last time we got dinner at Cheesecake, that you guys were mortal enemies when you were like in fourth or fifth grade. Can we go into that?
Yeah. Who do you want to start? Which
You,
I,
you,
perspective
you,
do
you
you want?
start, Adam.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think for every single listener we may have, depending on what you were into at recess, like I mean, we were football kids. We played two-hand touch football every single recess possible, except when they held us indoors. Shout out Ohio. But yeah, it was the one time you saw kids from the other classes that weren't in your homeroom group up until what, like fourth or fifth grade when we started switching classes for the first time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how it worked. Evan and I were never in the same homeroom class until gosh, like much later on. But Evan and I happened to be two of the more athletic kids in the grade. And when we would play football at recess, we got picked on opposing teams. Either we would both be the captains, or if we didn't want to be captains that day, it didn't matter because we were going to be in the first couple of picks. As a result, we hated each other because we had to guard each other because we were like fast kids, or it was just on opposing teams. And when you're competitive, I mean, I don't know if you can call it talking trash at that age, but it's probably just complaining and being salty about literally everything that could ever happen. So, yeah,
Yeah.
that's pretty much it. But then thankfully, we were on the same indoor soccer team, originally called the Pokemon, which then became the Green Machine. And we were Maumee Soccer Center champions for many years running. And maybe that's when things started turning for us and we actually became friends. But I was a little upset because Evan cared more about soccer than I did, and he was way better than I was, so he scored way more goals than I did.
Well, that was gonna be my follow-up. Who was better at soccer? But you just answered that.
Well,
Um,
it's obvious. There's one of us who actually was legit, and another one of us just sat in the stands and yelled and shouted through a vuvuzela.
But he was better at baseball. I mean, I played baseball in elementary school and maybe even junior high. I don't know. I didn't make it much past that, so it all evens out.
so I want to know, did you guys talk shit to your parents before you guys became friends about each other? So like when you find your parents finally met, or did they like 10 years after like you guys were friends bring up old stories that you guys as fourth graders said about each other?
I don't think so. Like it's weird because like our school's so small that like our parents probably knew each other like to some extent, knew of each other. Like I don't think I went home and was like complaining to my parents about Adam at recess or anything. I think it was just, like during our how long was recess? An hour or like lunch or like an
You have
half an hour,
45
however long it
minutes,
was.
somewhere in
You
that
know,
range.
after that, it was just kind of like you kind of forgot about it until the next recess. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't say I hated Adam. It's just we were just on the field. We were super competitive.
Yeah, recess enemies. But
Yeah.
also like there's weird connections in there too because um Evan and I's like initial path even through like preschool and stuff, we ran in very similar circles. Like one of our closest mutual friends at the time was this kid Doug Stockton who also went down the medical path. But I think I probably even met Evan for the first time in one of our like JCC Jewish Community Center gatherings because uh, Doug's parents worked with my dad, or his dad worked with my dad, and Evan's family was friends with Doug's family. So occasionally we would like overlap and had like the Jewish community thing going. So we ran in similar circles, but then ultimately, like for the first grade, when we're finally having recess at the same time and we're all playing sports together, that's when the clash happened. And then, like, I think we tried hanging out a couple times, but it was almost like those would just be like super competitive as well up until like third grade when we had our first like semi-developed people skills.
Right, right. And that's all history now. Now we're good.
Hopefully that answers your question, Banko.
No, it did. It did. I felt like we should have gotten into that because I mean we kind of glazed over that at the very beginning. Adam said it, and then we're just like, all right, going into medical school. So
Yeah, I mean,
figured I could
childhood.
circle the back. Yeah, I mean fair.
Well, Evan, obviously you were with people in these situations. Yes, I'm bringing it back to the serious side of things.
Mhm.
When these situations, like every time you hopped around on your rotations in medical school, uh, on the island, but you kind of always had to fend for yourself in a way. What was it that like offered you reassurance? Was it just your end goal of being in med school, or what could you rely upon to keep you going?
Yeah, it was just, I mean, I think when so like are you saying while I was in med school, like what kept me going? Like, is
I
that the
guess,
question?
yeah, let's separate it. That's probably a good point. I appreciate you clarifying that. Let's separate it because while in med school,
Hmm.
you had these massive like acts of God, as they would get referred
Hmm.
to, that kind of stood in your way as obstacles.
Yeah.
How'd you fight through those? Like, what kept you going? Because I'm sure, like, after the hurricane or things like that, or even having to go to the Caribbean, because I'm sure that wasn't your original goal when you were
Right.
coming through Ohio State. Like, I'm sure you envisioned staying in the States for medical school. Like, how did these kind of, I guess, alternative paths, how'd you stay
Yeah.
motivated or on the track while you fought through all that?
I think like what you alluded to earlier, like I've always been a competitive person. I've grown up playing sports my whole life, and was just kind of a competition with myself to like that I could do it. And I like going to the Caribbean, I kind of bet on myself that I would make it through and I'd be fine. You also have the background, you're taking out a ton of money in student loans. And if you don't make it to the end of the rainbow and you don't have, a high paying salary, you're going to be paying off these loans for the rest of your life. And, that was certainly a motivator, but I wasn't thinking about that really at the time, but um, a lot of people got stuck with that and that didn't make it through, and that kind of sucks. But just being competitive, a competitive person, and trying to not really prove anyone wrong, but just prove that I could get through. And, just because I went to the Caribbean, it didn't mean anything, or, you know, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty self-motivated. There wasn't like me trying to do it to prove it to someone else per se. But I know me and my friends pushed each other. Like it's not like we wanted to get the highest grade in the class or beat each other, but like I knew that if they were working hard studying, that I should be working hard studying. And it was that kind of back and forth that I made a good friend group, and um you motivate each other to get through it. And but you have to have self-discipline and all that stuff. And yeah, it's like golf. You're competing with yourself every time. I'm trying to get a good score. It doesn't matter what anyone else does. And that's kind of how I looked at it and just kind of grinded it out.
Do you think that self-motivation came from your parents, friend groups? Like, where do you think that kind of like self-motivation came from? Did you inherently have it as far as you can remember? Like, what do you think that came from?
Yeah, I'm sure at some point it came from my parents somewhat. I mean, they were always about me being independent and whatnot. But I've also been self-motivator myself as well. Um, Adam kind of mentioned it earlier on, but I was playing soccer and I broke my leg. I came back 6 months later, broke my leg again, like pretty soon after. Had a big surgery, came back and played soccer, and like that's something that I didn't necessarily have to do, but I was motivated. I wanted to play. I just wanted to do it. No one was making me do it. I wasn't doing it to for any other reason than to prove myself that I could get through whatever obstacle it was, and play again, and not be scared of that I might break my leg again, and things like that. So I think it all mostly came internally. I've been hard on myself for, I don't know, most of my life with that stuff. I want to be good at things, and I want to be able to do things and get through things, no matter how hard they are.
I appreciate you asking that, Banko. I definitely think that's a cool one. I obviously have the perspective of growing up around Evan. Maybe this is some context for the listener, but Evan's parents had their own dental practice as well. So I'm sure it's one of those like nature and nurture things that you
Yeah,
were exposed to. Is your whole life you saw the combination of entrepreneurship along with a motivated passion and an extreme expertise in a specific path,
yeah,
which I mean, whether it's something that you pursued directly or not, you were exposed to it your whole life. And how does that not rub off on you?
yeah. And I'm a pretty firm believer. Like I might not be the smartest person in the world, but I'm a pretty firm believer of, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard kind of thing. And so whatever I lacked in, my physical abilities, whether it's, soccer, I wasn't, super tall or big or strong, or, maybe eh, medically I wasn't the smartest person, but like I feel like what I did have was I could work hard and get through challenges. And that's something that maybe set me apart from other people. I mean, a lot of other people do that as well, but that was my strength, I think.
So, Evan, I want to address now the second part of that break that we had. Like, how did you get through all these obstacles? Now, like, what do you view kind of as your support system? Obviously, you can call back on family or friends, but you are in an industry like I think comparing it to golf, from my understanding, is like the perfect picture for it because you do have teammates in a way.
Hmm.
You have people whether it was in your rotations or school or in your residency, that are all fighting for the same goal, but there's also limited spots that you're
Yeah,
ultimately pushing towards. So how do you balance that team effort versus individual journey?
it's funny because like the whole medical journey is like looking back on it, it was fun. Like I'm still having fun. Like there's great parts about it, but it's also can be miserable. And there's kind of a thing that misery loves company. And like with you're with your friends that you've gone through these challenges with, it makes you really close and you're all kind of miserable together. And that kind of motivates you. And even through the residency or friends I've met in med school, we're all dealing with the same exact challenges, the same exact things. And you can kind of look to each other and motivate each other to get past those. And I'm lucky in med school, I made some really good friends that, they're in other specialties, but still go through the same residency problems, med school problems, and can always lean on them to kind of help get through things. But yeah, stuff like that makes you really close. So they're some of my closest friends. I was in two of their weddings. I only knew them for a few years, and I was invited to be in their weddings. So like things like that just like makes you close, and it's helps you get through the challenges that you mutually experience. Does that
Yeah,
does
no,
that answer it?
yeah, no, it
Definitely.
definitely does because like I mean, being in corporate America, I definitely can relate to that. There's definitely pieces where you're not the happiest, and there's other people around you that are definitely not happy either. And you kind of can vent even if you are
Yeah,
doing a good job. It gives you somebody that can actually understand. Not go like I could call Adam and vent to him, but he has no perspective on what's going on in corporate America because he's never been in it. So it's definitely helpful when you have those employees that you can, are friends slash colleagues slash employees that you can kind of lean on kind of thing.
yeah.
So definitely understand that.
Like for example, last night I was on a 24-hour call, and there were cases going in the middle of the night, and I was basically awake for 24 hours. I was doing a case from 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. last night, and I was texting one of my friends. This was before 2 a.m. and or one of my co-residents about like how pissed that was that this case is happening when it doesn't need to go, blah blah blah, and like he's on vacation. He's actually out of the bars, drinking, having a good time. But like, it was nice that I could vent to him and have him like text me back about like how awful it was and like how we both feel the same way. I mean, it was just complaining just to complain, and there's nothing we can do about it. But it feels good to, and he'd make jokes, and I'd make jokes about it. It makes like bad situation feel a little better that you're in. I don't know. If you don't have that, then I don't know. If you're just kind of by yourself, that can't be healthy, first of all, but like it definitely make it harder to get through these things.
So I know you can't disclose much of
Yeah.
a case, but like what would be popping up for you at between the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. as an anesthesiologist on call?
So yesterday there was three cases between the hours of 10 and like 5:45 a.m. Two of them were kidney transplants. Kidney became available, called people in, put a new kidney in them, and one of them was a stabbing. Guy got stabbed a bunch of times in the face and the chest and the shoulders, kind of everywhere. And um, so yeah, there's stuff like that. Gunshots that didn't come in last night, but stabbings did. Last week I was on call. Guy got shot in the face. Um, there's people that fall, hit their heads, car accidents, just emergency cases that people are just really sick and they're need an appendix out or a gallbladder. But yeah, last night was a stabbing and kidney transplants.
And how much of your work then during that is like in an OR versus alongside as support? Like, can you kind of walk us through
Yeah.
what the actual like mission was for you?
So basically, like for example, we had a kidney transplant that went from like 2 a.m. to like 5:45. We see the patient in the pre-op area, talk to him, get information about his medical history, kind of design the anesthetic based on that. And then I go into the OR with my attending who's on call with me. She's, the doctor, my boss. We get the patient asleep and, get all the, IVs or lines, whatever we need in them, put a breathing tube in, and then like I'm on my own from there. The attending leaves, surgeon comes in, and my job is to make sure the patient's vitals remain stable throughout the case. I'm playing with the ventilator, giving meds, giving pain meds, because you're still feeling pain even though you're asleep. Um, your vitals are still doing crazy things, and then making sure the patient wakes up. And I think that's the biggest misconception about anesthesiology. People say, oh, like you just like put people to sleep. And it's like, well, yeah, but like more of it is like making sure you wake up. It's like kind of the opposite. So yeah, I was in the OR. It was me and the surgeon and the surgeon's resident and an OR nurse for about 4 hours last night alone in the OR doing this case.
And maybe this is a dumb question, Banko. I apologize if I'm jumping in on this,
You're
but
good.
Evan did mention that they were talking to the patient about the medical history. How are you talking to a patient? Or wait, no, last night was kidney transplant. My bad. I
Yeah.
just
Well,
completely combined the
it, it
stabbing.
was well, so there's still the stabbing came into the emergency room, and you have to get as much information as you can. I mean, sometimes people are unconscious or whatever, and you can't get any information, and you kind of have to wing it's not the right word, but be more cautious with what you do. But even the stabbing guy, I mean, you can get some information out of him, and he was a healthy young guy. You're not really expecting anything crazy, um, health wise, but you never know.
Okay. Yeah, my bad. In my mind that you last night you were having a full-on discussion with somebody that has stab wounds in their face, shoulders, chest.
It was a half discussion. I mean, he was screamed in pain, and the emergency doctor was talking to him. The surgeon was, so it was like a bunch of people getting information all at once. Wasn't great information because I don't know. There's probably more behind that guy's story that we don't know. I mean, every time someone has a gunshot or stabbing or is in a sketchy situation, they always like, oh yeah, I was minding my own business and all of a sudden this I got shot, or like, yeah, this happened and I drove home and so I called you for my. You never know the full story of what happened, or because they don't. Nothing good happens after midnight. You don't get the full story, regardless of if they could even talk or not. They're usually pretty impatient when you're asking them questions. They've got a bullet hole in them. So
I think it'd be a good perspective. I mean, you kind of led to it a little bit there, but like give some background on what an anesthesiologist does, like what their full job is. Like, because like you said, most people are just like, oh, you put people to sleep and that's
yeah,
basically your job. I think it'd be a good time to sort of like go into like what that everything actually, like what you're responsible for, like what do you do as an anesthesiologist?
yeah. So there's kind of multiple roles, and I think the main one that everyone thinks of is you being in an operating room, and you use different medicines and put people to sleep, and then you keep them asleep with different medicines and make sure their vitals are stable. Because when you put someone to sleep, you place a breathing tube in them. That's a procedure you do. You hook them up to a ventilator. And so now you're controlling their breathing, you're controlling everything they do. Um, with surgical stimulus, like even though you're unconscious, your brain still registers, oh, this surgeon is stabbing me with a knife, cutting me open. Your heart rate goes up, your blood pressure goes up. And that stuff isn't good. You want to keep it kind of level. So you give more medications through the IV to keep those in in line. You have a bunch of monitors on the patient, monitoring all their vitals, and basically controlling their vitals. Uh, Anesthesia is basically you're putting someone in a medically induced coma. You're controlling most of their living, most of the things that keep them alive. You basically put them on the edge of life and death for a surgery to happen, so they don't feel it, and then you bring them out of it in the end. Um, I mentioned the breathing tube. That's something we do in a lot of cases. Or if someone they're just admitted to the hospital or come in the emergency room and they have trouble breathing, they're having heart problems and they're having a respiratory distress. We can place breathing tubes for other doctors and patients like that. We do things for pain. We do nerve blocks, and you take a needle and an ultrasound. You find some nerves in their arm, leg, wherever you're doing it, and inject some medication in there and numb the whole area, either for surgery or for pain relief and stuff like that. Um, yeah, it's there's more to it than that, but it's kind of hard to explain. But with every patient that comes in, they have a medical history, and there's a surgery that's being done. You have to design the anesthetic that's best for them based on their health, based on the surgery that's being completed, whether they need certain medications, whether their heart rate needs to be, within a certain range, or blood pressure. Do they need blood transfusions? Do they need this type of anesthesia or that type of anesthesia? And there's a lot that goes into it even before you step foot in the OR.
Got it. No, that's definitely helpful. And I also want to go back to, so you still, well, I guess feel is the wrong word, but you mentioned that like pain is still a thing when you're knocked out. Did we
Yeah.
just not remember it that we don't have the pain, but the pain is happening? So basically, you're talking about the vitals, the heart rate, the blood pressure. Is that what you're
Correct.
talking about?
Yeah, vitals, heart rate, blood pressure, respiratory rate, your oxygenation with a pulse ox. Basically, like we give you medications to make you forget things too. So there is a very, 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 very low percent chance that people have any sort of memory during surgery. We give medications to help even make that even lower. But yeah, you usually don't remember the pain, or even anything. I don't know if you've had surgery, but basically, I mean, it kind of blows my mind still every time you wheel a patient into the OR, and they don't even remember that half the time, because the drugs we give them, and they just remember like sitting in the pre-op area, and then like waking up and they're asking like, so when's the surgery gonna start? And it's like, dude, no, you've been done for an hour. You're in the recovery room. Like it's pretty crazy. Um, but yeah, your body still feels the stimulus and all that stuff. And sometimes you even need that stuff because anesthesia, a lot of the meds make your blood pressure tank and your heart rate go down and all that stuff. So you need the stimulus of surgery to keep that up. Um, but yeah, sometimes it's too high, sometimes it's too low, and your body still reacts as if you were awake, um, but you just don't remember.
Yeah, I'm really glad you shared that, and I'm glad Banko did ask that question. We definitely should have asked that earlier. Maybe it's fun to ask it 40 something minutes, 50 something minutes into the interview. But I maybe I'm naive, but I guess I just didn't realize that my body would still, or my brain would still be processing all of that.
Yeah,
I guess I just overlooked it because yeah, like being unconscious. Also, I think it's really cool context what you're saying regarding anesthesiology, because without a doubt, the general perspective of the position is you put people to sleep so they can have surgery, and that's the end of it. Like
yeah,
even those little things that you mentioned, like yeah, of course that makes so much sense. Why did I never think that was actually something that you control? And I guess I never really realized like why the anesthesiologist, again stating my ignorance, like why you are a part of the surgery from start to finish,
yeah.
and even the preparatory phase, and then probably even like the post-surgery
Yep.
phase, just to make sure the drugs are exiting the system properly or there's no adverse reaction.
Exactly. So like even other people in medical fields don't fully understand like what we do in anesthesia. It's kind of like a mystery. They think we like bring the patient to the OR and like flip a switch and the patient's asleep and turn off the switch and the patient wakes up. And it's not that. And
It should be
but
though.
yeah, that'd be sweet. But we're constantly giving medications through the IV. We're gas through the breathing tube that's going into your lungs. That's help keeping you asleep. You're connected to a ventilator that we're controlling every breath you take. Um, and yeah, and like you said, even after the surgery, we're giving you pain meds in the recovery room. We're making sure you don't have adverse reactions. If the surgeon does something and messes up, like we need to be able to fix from our end. Or if there's allergic reactions or adverse reactions to anesthesia. I mean, there's a lot that can go wrong. I mean, anesthesia is pretty safe nowadays. We're monitoring a lot of things, but I mean, it's still it's not hard to mess up and really hurt someone or even kill someone if you don't know what you're doing, if you don't pay attention. So you have to be very, very vigilant and know the surgery and know the patient very well. You're not always just like sitting back and like watching vitals the whole time. And sometimes the patient's stable and you don't have to do much. Other times you're constantly drawing up meds and doing a bunch of things. Like anesthesia is the one specialty where there's no double checks. There's no, I order a med, the pharmacy checks it, the nurse gets the med order, gives the patient the med on like the floors or something, and if they're admitted to the hospital and they're checking it, it's like, no, I've got to decide what's wrong, how to treat this. Then I go to my drawer filled with, 50 drugs, pick out the right drug, dose it myself. There's no pharmacy checking me, administer it myself, and watch the reaction. And anesthesia school, because you can see the vitals change, pretty quickly. It's pretty instant gratification, and you can play with things, which is what drew me to it in the first place. You're not like giving someone blood pressure meds and as a family medicine doctor and saying, all right, well, come see me in 3 months, we'll see how it does. It's like I can give you meds and I'll see the result in 30 seconds.
I feel like off of that, I kind of understand now the connection. 'Cause of course, being around you, I assumed you would always go into orthopedic surgery or something along that path, something in the sports world based on your history.
Yeah.
But now understanding like the mental connection, not just the physical connection of like what you've gone through, I understand why anesthesiology was the route, or like why you had this draw to it. Because like yeah, I don't want to say what you're doing is a sport by any means,
Yeah.
but it seems like there is this like
It's very active.
competition
Yeah.
aspect. There's the gratification aspect to it, but then of course the um like you're constantly proving the work that you've put in the actual like space that you're working in. Like you have to, there's no opportunity for mess ups. It's like, hey, it's go time. We have to be dialed in. We have to be perfect here. It's much like competing for a Super Bowl, World Series, NBA Finals, anything. And that's every single time you go out for a surgery. At least that's how I view it in my world.
Yeah, for sure. It's very active, and you're constantly learning and adapting. Um, but yeah, I mean, surgical specialties, like if I did orthopedic surgery, like I would only be doing bone stuff basically the rest of my life. But with anesthesia, I get to see orthopedic surgeries, lung surgeries, heart surgeries, vascular. I mean, every day I could do surgery on a different organ system and see that. And I think that that variety is pretty cool, and that's another thing that drew me to it. Each has its own individual challenge as well.
Getting that exposure and based on what you can disclose, because obviously medical stuff, what's been like the scariest thing you've experienced throughout your like residencies or medical or like in a surgery OR? Like, what's the scariest thing that you've seen?
Um, there's times where the surgeon nicks a big artery or blood vessel, and you're just like bleeding out really fast, and you're just unstable, and your vitals are taking a dive, and you've got to be able to react and do the right things to keep them alive. And not everybody makes it. I mean, anesthesia can't save every complication of surgery. I've seen heart surgeries go wrong. I've seen traumas just where like there's gunshots to the head or to the chest where you do everything you can, and sometimes they make it to the OR, sometimes they don't. And even in the OR, you have people dying on the table sometimes because of just, again, some things are beyond our ability to fix. Um, so I don't know if I have an individual thing that was like super scary that I can. There's been a bunch of things that have been scary that are complications of things that really stress you out and make you think. But yeah, a lot of traumas, a lot of really sick patients. Usually, if they're working on like the heart, those are always pretty intense cases.
On
What
the other side of that, actually, Banko, I'm sorry. You're on a roll. I'll ask my question later.
yeah, this just relates to it, and then you can get into it. But I guess again to add the context of kind of your role, you're in a surgery, an artery or major organ gets nicked. What is your role in helping stabilize those vitals? Like, what's your role in that to help try to save the patient, basically? Because obviously you're not trying to sew up the artery. That's what the
Right.
surgeon's doing. What's your role in that?
So basically, like you said, the surgeon's role there is to find that bleed and sew it up and fix it. And until they can do that, my role is to make sure your blood pressure stays up, your heart rate stays up, and you have enough blood in your body. So we'll run blood transfusions. I'll give medications that increase your heart rate, that increase your increase your blood pressure, tighten your vessels, make your heart so it actually pumps and gets blood to the rest of your body. Yeah, mess with the ventilator settings to make sure you're getting oxygen throughout your body. It could be, making the bed in certain positions to help with vitals. But a lot of it is managing medically with medications or things on the ventilator or blood products. Because we're the ones doing all that. The surgeon's the one that's, fixing the hole. We're a temporizing measure because that's not something that we can do for the rest of this patient's life. Like, you can't live with a hole in your aorta or whatever. But until they can fix it, it's our responsibility to make sure like they don't tank, because once you get below a certain level, it's hard to recover, and you have to do chest compressions, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah. No, me being ignorant, like I didn't actually know that you guys were like the blood transfusion. I didn't know that was that role and everything and what all went into that. So that's actually good to know.
Yeah.
And Banko, don't worry, mine was along the same path. I was just going to ask the other side of the questions that you just asked. I was curious, Evan, now that Banko is kind of taking us down this path of scarier situations or more difficult situations, I'm curious, how do you manage, I guess, you as well as others in the OR, something that would be thought of as a simple or standard procedure, but make sure you're still treating it with the same care or attention that you would treat a true life and death situation? Because obviously all surgery is serious, but I understand that there's scales to that.
A lot of anesthesia is preparation. So you're always preparing for what can go wrong with a given anesthetic and a given surgery. And so when you set up the OR, you're preparing for the worst in a lot of cases. So you have certain things ready at all times, or at least, available for anticipated complications. And yeah, you have to take every surgery seriously because you never know what's going to happen. But yeah, it's about preparation and preparing the right way. It's also about experience. The more stuff you see, the more you'll be able to anticipate things. The less stressed you'll be, because anytime you see anything for the first time, even if it's a simple surgery, I remember the first time being alone in the OR. I mean, I was sweating bullets. Your heart rate's racing. I've got an Apple Watch, and I would get done with the day, and my Apple Watch would say I exercised for like 7 hours that day because my heart rate was so high, and I hadn't moved from the OR. And since then I've seen a lot of things and gotten more calm, even in scary situations, and I know how to react better. And yeah, as an anesthesiologist, you have to be calm because if people see you panic, then they panic and everything gets worse. But you're kind of the voice of calm and reason in the OR, and when stuff goes bad, you kind of run the show.
So how do you stay calm, whether it's in that situation or maybe out of work now? We've been on the serious path for a
Yeah,
while. Maybe like how do you keep things light? Obviously, you're constantly in life and death situations,
yeah.
but like how do you relax? How do you step away from it all?
I mean, it's even just like I mentioned earlier, talking to co-residents and telling them like, can you believe that this happened? Like some nonsense that happened in the OR, and then they would laugh about like how crazy it was. And they tell me like what happened in their OR, and like at the time it's serious. I mean, it's people's lives, but once if you make it out and everything's fine, like it's like there. I don't want to say funny is the right word, but you can make it more lighthearted, and it's I don't know. It's hard to explain, but then I guess outside of work, I love sports. I like watching most sports. That's how I relax. Hanging out with friends, doing nothing sometimes because um, days are busy. Like today, I'm hopefully doing nothing all day. But maybe watch some March Madness, throw on the TV, and that sounds great to me. Like I don't know, and it's pretty cold outside. Or I could go for like a walk and do stuff like that. I don't think I do anything too crazy or out of the ordinary to relax. Um, But yeah, just being away from the hospital is nice. Just stepping foot in that place is puts you on edge. So any second outside of it makes you feel a little better.
Out of curiosity, what's your resting heart rate then out of the hospital?
My resting heart rate in the hospital.
Resting in and out of the hospital, I guess.
See what it is right now. I don't know. I'm live on a podcast. It could be a little high. Oh, not too bad. I'm 61 right now, so
Whoa.
that's good.
Okay.
But I'm probably in during the day. I'm probably pushing 70s, 80s in a real stressful situation, 90s, hundreds for sure.
Yeah, that was a sick flex. I didn't want to inject a joke in the middle of that, but I wanted to say like weird flex, but okay. When you
Oh,
said when your Apple Watch said you worked out for 7 straight hours, ultimate endurance athlete over here. He's
exactly,
biohacking cold plunges in Dominica, with
exactly.
extreme vitamin D exposure to the sun constantly. I think maybe like Joe Rogan wants to be you.
Closed all
seven
my
hour
rings, just
workout.
sitting in the OR. Yeah.
Well, Evan, I don't want to take anything away from Banko here, but I'm curious if there's anything that uh, another crazy story or anything that you kind of want to get into that we haven't touched on yet, whether it is in anesthesiology or just being in the hospital or just life experiences in general, whether it's something completely unrelated to medicine, like maybe something else you're passionate about right now.
Crazy story. Nothing
Or a
like
really basic story.
I mean, I spend so much time in the hospital. That's like my life. I don't really have that much of a life outside of the hospital besides my 4 weeks of vacation I get a year. And you know, I was in Florida last week. I was in Florida a couple months ago where I saw you guys. You know, that's nice and relaxing. Um, but I guess a good story would be, you know, the semester med school I did on that boat. There's a lot of crazy stories just from that. Just like living on this boat in a room. You walk in, there's two bunk beds and like a narrow hallway you can reach across. You know, living in that with you know 4 people for 4 months with a bathroom that's like an airplane bathroom, like that size. That sucked. We had a time where you know you have all these people on this boat using all these electricity and chargers and whatnot, wiped out the electricity on half the boat, and the toilets were they were like those like vacuum flush toilets like on an airplane, and I guess it runs on electricity to make it work. So like for a whole day, none of the toilets flushed on the boat because the circuit blew, and like that was a nightmare. Like that was bad. Like you just like couldn't use the toilet for like a day. The food they served was horrible. They once served us a meal and it was literally called wet fish. Like that was the name on the label, and that was gross. They served us like little like mini fried fishes. Like it had their whole like eyes and everything on it. It was just like I swear they just threw it in a fryer and like fed it to us, like just like whole fish they plucked out of the ocean. Um, what else? I don't know. There's a bunch of just random things. But yeah, anything in particular you were alluding to or want to know more about? I don't know. I'm pretty boring outside the hospital.
No, I was really just curious because like these are obviously your stories to tell. There's things I can call back on, but I just more wanted to know, yeah, like what you shared, like your experience is so unique. It's
Yeah.
different than the majority of med school students because of all the places you have gone, because of Dominica and Ross, and then the boat. Like it,
Yeah.
it's just like it's weird that this stuff has almost become normal to you because of how much it has happened.
Yeah, it's crazy how like weird things like that become normal. Like, I mean, even in residency, just like I'm in a regular residency like anyone else, despite where I went, you know, to med school. And like even in that, like crazy stuff happens on a daily basis that to anyone outside the hospital would be like what? Like that's insane. Be like, oh no, that's normal. Like that's just It's another Tuesday. Like last night during this kidney transplant at 2 a.m., the surgeon is like blasting EDM music over the speakers in the OR. Like the OR was like bumping. Like you felt like you were in a club in Miami. And like that's just what he does at like his 2 a.m. kidneys. I swear this guy like snorts a line of cocaine and like thinks he's going clubbing and then like does these transplants. I mean, it's obviously not true, but like I mean, it's like loud and it's just not what you think of when you think of like a surgery and you know the patient's asleep, they can't hear it, but like it's it's a fun environment, but it's not less fun at 2 a.m. But
What's the name of the club?
the name of the club, I don't know, Club OR. I don't know. That was lame.
That's what I had going in my head.
I mean, he's working off of what, 4 hours of sleep right now? You were up from 2 to 5 and you came on the podcast. So I mean, I'm more appreciative at this point. Like respect for you. Like Adam texted us and was like, "Hey, can we do this at 2 instead of 4?" You were probably gonna sleep another 2 hours before the 4 o'clock
Yeah,
one. But
whenever I texted you was like I had been up for like 10 minutes at that point. So I came home at like 7 a.m. And slept until whenever that was. But yeah, I was up for like literally almost 24 hours straight yesterday, and then I don't know, I got maybe 5 hours of sleep this morning. I don't remember what time you texted me.
You texted back at 9:55. So you are on
Oh,
2 hours and
that
50
was way
minutes of
less than I
sleep.
thought. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I
Grinding.
lost track. Like I don't even know. I don't even know what day it is. Like and I've got to go to work tomorrow at 6 a.m. Like it's just yeah. I feel
Well,
good. I drank my coffee.
second part of the question is there anything else you're passionate about right now or that you even have time for? 'Cause this obviously consumes your life, but this is typically stealing a question from Banko. I don't know if he had this in the cards today or not, but like, are you reading anything? Is there anything that like really gets you going right now besides your work?
You know, I wish I could read more. Unfortunately, like even after you get home from residency, you got to come home and like do practice questions and read textbooks for board exams. So I don't really read for pleasure that much as much as I want to. Um, if you count being a degenerate gambler, I get joy out of that. You
Yep.
know,
We count
sitting
that.
on my FanDuel and placing bets on, you know, whatever sport I see and know nothing about. You know, it's good time, March Madness. You know, maybe I'll shoot, no, it's maybe next weekend. I don't know if I'm working next weekend. I'll go watch a game somewhere with some friends. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to be able to travel more and do more things, but it's hard with, you know, my friends' schedules and everyone's residency, so they only have certain times off. It's hard to manage. And you're busy too. You know, I'd love to come visit you, and but like, you know, your schedule. I mean, it's just hard. It's as adulting sucks. Like you gotta like make appointments to see your friends. Like, what are you doing this day at like 3 p.m.? It's like crazy.
Go back to the days where you say, "Mom, can Evan come over?"
Yeah,
Be way
exactly. And I
better.
just ride my bike over and then we tandem bike cross or play trampoline dodgeball, which is needs to be a sport I can bet on, but one day maybe.
you got any bets that you want to shout out for me to take today?
let's
Or
let's let's see what I got going right
I haven't
now.
even looked today.
Gambling problem. Please call.
Yeah, you gotta
Yeah,
put the one
exactly.
eight hundred gambler number at
Yeah,
the
we gotta
bottom.
we gotta put a ticker across that.
That one, this is not
Like
what this
This
isn't like real advice or something like that. You
this
can
is
lose money to I
like
don't know all the things we're supposed to say as like the
this is our
disclaimers.
opinion and not fact
yeah,
or advice at all.
Yeah,
like
all
I had a
right,
bet
Evan, go.
today, Colorado versus Marquette. Colorado plus 3.5. They lost by 4. I lost that bet. I got Purdue minus 11.5. I got a little parlay going. Alabama minus 6.5. UConn money line. Houston money line. Got Duke to cover. You know, a couple. Those are just a couple I got going today.
Okay. Yeah, I gotta
Um,
look at this. I haven't looked today. It's been a slow day, but yeah, no, it was betting yesterday.
I
let's
currently have
go.
house money the rest of the tournament, which I'm very excited about. I made my money back that I threw in the tournament. So everything else now is just profit. I'm
You're
very excited
gambling?
about it. What?
I don't. You're gambling?
I do my standard thing with like pools with
Devils.
friends, that kind of
Oh,
thing.
okay.
And now I made all my entry fees back. So anything from this is just profit.
Nice. Yeah. I thought the one Hard Rock experience was gonna cut you off from all gambling ever.
Sports gambling and playing table games are two completely different things for me.
So you'll go play some blackjack?
No.
No, he
Uh-uh.
Oh,
won't. So I
oh,
took him. I took him to the Hard Rock once in Tampa. He had $20, and I was like, there's like a stat out there, like the first 7 minutes is like when you win, like right when you enter the casino. He walked in, put his $20 down, lost. He goes, "This is dumb." Never has gambled again.
that's gambling for you. But then just think of if you won $20.
Well,
That's
that's
what
what I'm
keeps you
saying.
going back.
Well, I was like, they knew they needed to take his money because they knew it wouldn't draw him in. The
Yeah.
casino knew. They were like, yeah, his personality, he won't.
It's like golf though. Like this is the second time we've alluded to golf, but like you can be like chunking it all day, like just sucking, and then you hit that one shot that's beautiful, like and you're like, I'm the greatest golfer alive, and that's like keeps you going, like for that one shot in the hundreds you shoot. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, we have a buddy down here that's just getting into golf. He texts my roommate all the time, and he got his first birdie the other day. He's like, that'll keep me going for about 4 or 5 months now.
Exactly.
Uh, and then like a coworker was in like a business tournament during the week last week. Came into the office, is like, yeah, I was playing terrible, but I got a hole in one, so I'm good for forever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so we're going to get drinks. He's like, no, we're not doing that. I'm like, all right, cool.
Hole in one is golf retirement territory.
It's his second one.
What?
What?
Yeah, yeah. He's like, I have really good timing. He's like, the first one was in high school, so he's like, obviously couldn't buy drinks for everyone there because I was in high school. And he goes, this was a charity event, so it was an open bar, so I didn't have to pay for drinks again. And I was like,
Nice.
good for you.
Yeah, Evan, when we find our way to make it back to St. Pete, I guess we'll just have to set up our golf league.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Only a
When's that
few months
happening?
away.
Yeah. When's this happening? When you moving?
When am I moving?
Either of you. I
Oh,
mean, I already
I'm,
committed. I'm here.
yeah, you're there. I mean, I'll be done with residency in July of next year, and then I got to start looking for jobs in the next 5 or 6 months. Though, I mean, definitely gonna look down there. I'm gonna look around here, probably Columbus too. So we'll see. We'll see what the job market looks like. But it's hard to stay away from Florida weather.
And I just
Yeah,
have to monitor the housing market. Well, I got to get married first, then monitor the housing market.
it's true.
Eh,
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
If you
But
guys
yeah,
want to gift me a house for my wedding, that'd be pretty sweet.
if you want to pay rent, I'll get the house and then you can just pay me. You and Corey can pay me rent. I'd be down for that.
yeah, I got
We'll have
nothing.
these business discussions offline.
Yeah, but no, Evan, I appreciate you coming on and taking the time, especially on 2.5 hours of sleep, even though you feel like it's five. Any last things you want to say before like we stop the recording, then we can have these discussions offline?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say for people that are interested in like the medical path, it is a long road. It is horrible and great at the same time. As far as medical school goes, like I think having a routine is incredibly important, a study routine, making the right friends, being around the right people who have similar motivations and aren't going to lead you astray or like compete with you. You want people to help you out. Definitely a routine, a strict study schedule, studying smart, not necessarily like putting in a million hours if you're being inefficient with that time. Um, yeah, and then residency, that's a whole other ball game. Very scary at first, but you know, you learn what you need to learn, and if you made it that far, you'll do what you have to do to get through it. And yeah, it's not for everybody. It's like people always ask, and like, would you recommend medicine to like your kids, or would you recommend medical school to your kids, or whatever? And it's like you'll hear 99% of doctors say no, 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 like it's not worth it. And like I can see that perspective, but I think it's something you're passionate about and you're willing to work hard. I think it's worth doing because it is a lot of fun. It's stressful and it's a lot of responsibility, but it's kind of cool.
Well, thanks for that, man. And I really do appreciate you joining us today. Of course, I do appreciate you as a friend and just really a lifelong companion because I know we're always going to have this together no matter how far away we are. But thankfully for technology, we're always a call away, text away. And you being able to share your experiences with us and now with a following is a very cool experience.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I didn't know what to expect coming on this, and I hope I answered your questions properly or got whatever information you're trying to convey, out the right way, and it fit the format of this series. But yeah, I had fun. I enjoyed this.
Now, this is what it's all about. It's just talking with people with unique or different experiences that are extremely successful or in a difficult field or something that we might not have experience in ourselves. And I think you shined a light on a profession that not many of us are really going to have any idea what it looks like. So thank you. I mean,
Yep.
what you do for the general population is incredible, and uh, the world is a better place because of people like you.
Appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, man. And until next time, everyone, we'll talk to you.
Hi everyone, Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.